The first thing I became aware of when I woke up was a dull ache in my throat. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Something rigid was lodged there, making it impossible. As my vision adjusted, I realized I was in a hospital room, surrounded by monitors entangled in wires and tubes. My left arm was secured in a cast, and the tightness of bandages on my face added to my discomfort. Confusion clouded my thoughts. What had happened? How long had I been here? I attempted to shift, but my body protested with every movement. The sound of the door opening drew my attention. A nurse entered quietly, checking my vitals and examining the chart at the end of the bed. She didn't say a word as she worked, but soon after she returned with a doctor. He performed similar checks, shining a light in my eyes and nodding at the nurse before addressing me. The nurse moved swiftly, removing the tube from my throat, and with it came the sudden realization of why I hadn't been able to speak. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," the doctor said with a calm, professional smile. Mr. Carter. Marcus Carter. That was me. I tried to respond, but my throat felt like sandpaper, and my lips were cracked and dry. The nurse handed me a small piece of ice, which I accepted gratefully, letting it melt slowly on my tongue. Another followed, soothing the rawness. "How long?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. "You've been here for 10 days, the doctor replied. "There was swelling in your brain, so we placed you in a medically induced coma to allow it to heal. You also suffered a severe head injury and a broken arm." He turned to the nurse and instructed her, "Notify Mrs. Carter that her husband is awake." "No," I said quickly, shaking my head as firmly as my weakened body allowed. The doctor frowned. "Why not?" I swallowed hard, and the memory beginning to surface. "She's the reason I'm here." His expression shifted slightly, a mix of concern and understanding. "I see. Should we contact the police instead?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, and a divorce lawyer." The doctor gave a faint chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "We'll arrange for the police. As for legal representation, that will be up to you." After a brief check, they wheeled me out for x-rays. When I returned, a man in a trench coat entered the room. He flashed a badge, introducing himself as Detective Mike Thompson from Metro Police. Pulling up a chair, he gestured toward me. "Mr. Carter, do you feel up to talking?" he asked. I nodded, taking a cautious sip of water. He set a recorder on the tray table. "Mind if I record this for my report?" "No problem," I replied hoarsely. He pressed the record button and leaned forward. "Can you tell me what happened?" I took a steadying breath. I had just returned from a business trip to Pittsburgh. I finished earlier than expected and decided to surprise my wife, Megan. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car parked out front that I didn't recognize. I thought maybe she had a friend over, but when I walked inside, the house was mostly dark. The only light was coming from upstairs, and I could hear noises. I clenched my jaw at the memory, forcing myself to continue. I went up. In our bedroom, there she was, Megan, with another man. They didn't even seem surprised to see me. It felt like I was the one intruding. I went for the guy, but before I could land a punch, he hit me first. I blacked out. The next thing I remember is waking up here. "Did you recognize him?" Thompson asked. "No," I replied flatly. I'd never seen him before. "Had you suspected she was being unfaithful?" I hesitated before admitting, "I had my suspicions, but nothing concrete. But now, I remember something." I shifted slightly, trying to organize my thoughts. "I hired a private investigator before my trip. The house is wired with cameras, video and audio. Everything should be saved on the cloud." The detective leaned forward, intrigued. "Can you access the footage from here?" "I think so," I said. "My wallet has the login information." He retrieved my wallet from the closet and handed it to me. Flipping through, I found the card with the details and passed it to him. "Adam Scott," Thompson read aloud. "That your investigator?" I nodded. "He's the one who called 911 and gave a statement. He said he found me at the bottom of the stairs." Thompson powered up his laptop, connected to the hospital's Wi-Fi, and logged into the system with my details. A list of video files appeared, and I guided him to the relevant date. The footage loaded, showing Megan in the living room with a large, bald man trailing behind her. "That him?" Thompson asked. "Yeah," I confirmed. "That's the guy." We watched in silence as Megan led him upstairs. I fast-forwarded to the next clip where they were in the bedroom. She opened a drawer, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to him. He counted the money inside before tucking it back in. "Half now, half when the job's done," she said. I felt a cold wave wash over me. Was this what I thought it was? The man smirked. "Let's make it official," he said. Megan smiled, and moments later, they were undressing. They climbed into bed together, utterly unconcerned. "That's your husband's side, right?" the man asked at one point. "Why does it matter?" she replied, laughing. "That's where I'm going to leave my mark," he said, smirking. My fists clenched as I watched the scene unfold, and then I appeared in the video, bursting into the room. I went straight for the man, but he struck first, knocking me unconscious. The footage showed him dragging my body out of the bedroom while Megan stood there, making no attempt to intervene. The video ended, leaving an eerie silence in the room. I navigated back to the video catalog and selected the next file. The footage began with 3 sets of feet at the top of the stairs. 2 were barefoot, and the third wore shoes. The large man lifted me effortlessly, as though I weighed nothing, and hurled me down the stairs. My body hit the floor below with a horrifying thud, motionless. Megan's voice rang out, chillingly calm. She asked if I was dead. The man shrugged, unsure. He suggested finishing the job right then and there, but Megan refused. "Not in the house," she said. "I don't want to deal with any more mess than necessary. Let him lie there. Maybe he'll do us both a favor and die on his own." The man agreed, adding that if I didn't, he'd come back later to take care of it. Their conversation shifted to plans for leaving. Megan mentioned meeting him at her hotel to finish their business. A few minutes later, the pair descended the stairs, now dressed, and stepped over my limp body without a moment's hesitation. The screen faded to black, and the video ended. Driven by a mix of dread and curiosity, I clicked on the next video. This one showed Adam entering the house. He immediately found me lying at the bottom of the stairs and called 911 without hesitation. He stayed by my side until the paramedics arrived, ensuring I wasn't alone. The recording cut off after the ambulance took me away. Whatever Megan and her accomplice had planned next, it was happening somewhere else. I turned to Detective Thompson, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What now?" Thompson closed the laptop with a measured calm. "We need to track down Megan and the man she was with," he said. I reiterated that I didn't recognize the man, but Thompson clearly did. He identified him as Troy Turner, better known as Troy Hamm, a notorious hitman wanted by federal authorities for multiple murders. "You're lucky to be alive," he said gravely. The weight of his words sank in. Why would Megan want me dead? What could drive her to this? Thompson asked about my job and home life, probing for potential motives. I explained that I was a salesman focused on customer service, and that my relationship with Megan had only started to feel off recently. He asked if I had ever been unfaithful during my business trips. "Never," I said firmly. He seemed to believe me. Switching gears, Thompson asked about life insurance. I told him I had a $1 million policy through work, with a payout doubling in case of accidental death. Megan was the sole beneficiary. The conversation moved to finances, and I mentioned my recent lottery win, $3 million after taxes. I had planned to surprise Megan with a cruise to celebrate. "Did she know about the money?" Thompson asked. "She knew I won, but not the amount," I replied. "I manage all the finances, and she's never taken an interest in checking the details." Thompson's expression darkened as he connected the dots. "If something happened to you, she'd be looking at a $5 million windfall." I logged into my bank account, my hands is trembling. The screen revealed 3 large withdrawals, $55,000 each made over the past 12 days. My stomach dropped. I immediately canceled our joint credit cards and reported her ATM card stolen. Meanwhile, Thompson worked on freezing the rest of the account. When he asked if I had any idea where Megan might be, I shook my head. Normally, she would be at home, but now I had no clue. Thompson suggested we call Adam, who might have more information. I dialed Adam's number, and he picked up on the second ring. His voice was filled with relief to hear I was awake. He quickly shared what he knew. Megan was at the airport, preparing to board a flight to Chicago. Her departure wasn't for another 4 hours, giving us some time. Troy Turner wasn't with her yet, but Adam suspected they would meet soon. Thompson instructed Adam to keep tabs on her while he coordinated with law enforcement to have her detained at the airport. Once the call ended, Thompson sprang into action. He arranged for warrants, alerts for Turner, and all the necessary steps to ensure neither Megan nor her accomplice could slip away. By the time he finished, the doctor returned to check on me, informing me that I would need to remain in the hospital for a few more days to recover. Before leaving, Thompson assured me that officers would be stationed outside my room for my protection. "Take care of yourself," he said as he walked out. "We'll let you know if anything changes." After Detective Thompson left, I tried to distract myself by flipping through TV channels, but my thoughts kept circling back to Megan. How could she betray me like this? I had been a loyal husband, a reliable provider, and, at least I thought, a good partner. Where had it all gone so wrong? My mind drifted back to the early days of our relationship. I came from a hardworking family. My father spent decades in a factory to ensure I could go to college, and I had done my best to make him proud. I majored in business and met Megan Bennett during our sophomore year. From the moment we met, I was captivated. We dated all through college, fell deeply in love, and got married shortly after graduation. I landed a steady job at a financial services firm, helping small businesses improve profitability. Megan started her career at a bank, eventually working her way up to the mortgage lending department. Those first few years of marriage were idyllic. We were inseparable, and intimacy was a regular and fulfilling part of our lives. We even talked about starting a family. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. Was it all really just about money? A knock at the door pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, briefly letting me know they'd be stationed outside my room for security. I thanked them and they nodded before stepping back into the hallway. A second knock came a few minutes later. This time it was Adam. He entered with a relieved smile, giving me a quick once-over. "You're looking a lot better than the last time I saw you," he said. I managed a weak chuckle. "Feels like I got hit by a truck, but at least I'm upright." Adam sat down, his tone becoming serious. "Megan's been arrested. They caught her at the airport, and she's facing charges for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder." He paused, watching my reaction. "They haven't found Turner yet, though. The police have been monitoring your house, but there's no sign of him." He handed me my phone, explaining that he'd found it on the floor at the house and had picked up a replacement charger since mine was missing. I thanked him as he plugged it into the wall, my thoughts already racing. Adam then asked if I'd contacted a divorce lawyer yet. I reminded him I had only just regained consciousness that morning. He reached into his pocket and handed me a card. "Laura Scott," he said. "She's one of the best. Hates cheaters and traitors. She'll take good care of you." After a moment of silence, I asked about what happened after the attack. Adam explained that Megan had been plotting for a while. She'd taken a vacation after I left for Pittsburgh and hadn't planned on returning home after the assault. She and Turner had been hiding out in motels, moving locations frequently. He mentioned trying to relay this information to Detective Thompson, but their timing hadn't aligned. We discussed Turner briefly, but Adam admitted he didn't have any new leads. He assured me he'd keep digging and pass along anything he uncovered. Before leaving, he urged me to focus on recovering and promised to check in soon. Once Adam was gone, I took a deep breath, trying to sort through the mess my life had become. When my phone had enough charge, I dialed the number on the card Adam had given me. A receptionist answered, cheerful and professional, and promptly connected me to Laura Scott. Laura's voice was warm yet authoritative, as she introduced herself. After confirming my identity, she asked if I was still in the hospital. When I half joked about being the target of an assassin, she offered to meet me in person, an unexpected but welcome gesture. I agreed, impressed by her proactive approach. About an hour later, Laura arrived. She was sharp and confident, carrying a leather briefcase. We spent the next hour discussing my situation. Despite living in a no-fault divorce state, she planned a file based on Megan's betrayal and extreme cruelty. She explained that Megan's arrest and her hiring a hitman would work heavily in my favor. Laura assured me she would fight to secure everything I deserved in the divorce. With Megan in jail, she emphasized, I held the upper hand. Just as Laura was preparing to leave, another knock sounded. Detective Thompson entered with a smile, exchanging friendly pleasantries with Laura before sitting down. "I've got some updates," Thompson began. "Megan has confessed. She admitted to hiring Turner to kill you and make it look like an accident." His tone turned serious. "She did it for money and her affair." He explained that Megan had been involved with Paul Evans, a coworker, and, as it turned out, Turner's nephew. Together, they had concocted a plan to run away to Hawaii, but they couldn't afford it. When Megan saw the lottery winnings in my account, she saw her chance for a payday. With the life insurance on top of that, she thought she'd be set for life. Thompson went on to say that the district attorney was seeking life in prison without parole for Megan and was opposing bail due to her being a flight risk. Paul Evans had also been arrested and was being interrogated. If Megan's claims checked out, he would face charges as well. Turner, however, remained at large. Thompson assured me that a county-wide search was underway and that officers would continue guarding my hospital room until Turner was apprehended. I shook my head, struggling to comprehend it all. Megan had never shown signs of dissatisfaction in our marriage. Why now? Thompson could only shrug. Money does strange things to people, he said. After he left, I turned to Laura and asked if she knew Detective Thompson. She smiled knowingly. I represented him in his divorce a few years back, she said. We spoke briefly about the case before I thanked her for her support. I offered to write a check for her retainer, and she fetched my wallet from the table. I filled out a blank check I always kept for emergencies, and she tucked it into her briefcase with a reassuring smile. Take care of yourself, she said before leaving. I'll keep in touch. Alone again, I stared blankly at the TV. Life could change so drastically, so quickly. It was true, I thought. All good things must come to an end. After a few weeks of recovery, my doctor finally gave me the green light to go home. During my time in the hospital, I'd had several visitors, friends, colleagues, Adam, and of course, Detective Thompson. Mike kept me updated on Megan's case and the ongoing manhunt for Turner. Paul Evans had already been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, and Megan had been served divorce papers in jail. Surprisingly, she hadn't contested anything, signing them without a fight. Laura informed me that in just 60 days, I'd officially be a free man. The divorce terms were clear. I retained the house and all our shared possessions, while Megan would keep her car, clothes, and personal items. I spoke briefly with her parents, who agreed to handle the process of collecting her belongings. What they did with them afterward wasn't my concern. Adam came to pick me up from the hospital. On the drive home, he brought up something unexpected. Do you own a gun? He asked casually. I told him about an old shotgun my dad had given me for my 17th birthday. It was more than a firearm. It was a memory of the times we spent trap and skeet shooting together, some of my happiest moments growing up. Though I hadn't used it in years, it was still locked away safely in its case. Adam nodded thoughtfully. Might be a good idea to keep it close, he said. Turner's still out there. That night, I took his advice. I retrieved the shotgun, checked that it was still in good condition, and loaded it. Instead of sleeping in the master bedroom, still tainted by the memory of Megan's betrayal, I settled into a chair in the living room, the shotgun within arm's reach. It turned out to be the right choice. Late that night, I was startled awake by the sound of scratching outside. I froze, listening intently, and soon spotted the silhouette of a large man by the sliding glass door. He hadn't noticed me yet, but I could clearly see the pistol in his hand. It was Turner. Without hesitation, I reached for the shotgun and turned on the lamp. The sudden light startled him, and our eyes locked. He began to raise his weapon, but I acted first, firing a shot that sent him crashing against the mesh door. His gun discharged wildly, hitting the ceiling. I chambered another round and fired again, striking him square in the chest. He collapsed onto the veranda, blood pooling beneath him. I immediately called 911, chambering a third round as I cautiously approached the door. Turner lay motionless, his pistol just out of reach. I briefly considered firing again, but stopped when flashing lights appeared outside. Police officers stormed in, weapons drawn. I set the shotgun down and raised my hands, signaling that I was unarmed. One officer checked Turner's pulse before shaking his head. "He's gone," he said. What followed was a blur of questions and statements. Paramedics arrived to retrieve Turner's body, zipping him into a bag and wheeling him out just as Detective Thompson arrived. Mike took one look at Turner and then turned to me. "You okay?" he asked, his tone softer than usual. I nodded, though I was visibly shaken. "I've never shot anyone before," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike gave me an understanding look. "It's not something anyone forgets," he said, "but it was him or you. Turner was a trained killer. You did what you had to do. He stayed with me as the officers finished their investigation. Before leaving, Mike suggested we grab a coffee. The idea of something normal sounded appealing, so I excused myself to change out of my pajamas. After changing into jeans and a t-shirt, I returned downstairs. The house was quiet again, the officers having cleared out. Mike drove us to a nearby 24-hour coffee shop. I ordered a mocha with caramel, and Mike couldn't resist teasing me. "Liquid candy," he joked, grinning. I shrugged it off, savoring the small indulgence. We talked for a while about lighter topics, fishing, soccer, and other guy stuff. Eventually, Mike steered the conversation back to the night's events. He asked how I was holding up, and I admitted I was still processing everything. I confessed that I'd only ever shot clay pigeons before. Mike shared a story from his rookie days, when he'd been forced to fire his weapon for the first time. "It shook me up," he said, "but I knew it was him or me. You made the right call." He reassured me that under the state's castle doctrine, I was well within my rights to defend myself. His words offered some comfort. Before we left, he handed me a card. "Dr. Julia Clark," he said. "She's excellent at helping people work through trauma. Give her a call." Back at home, I thanked Mike as he dropped me off. "Don't forget to call Dr. Clark," he reminded me before driving away. Sleep didn't come easily that night, so by morning, I gave up trying. After showering and having breakfast, I knew there was one more thing I needed to do. I called the county jail and arranged a visit with Megan. Sitting in the visiting area, I waited until she was brought out. She looked tired, and the orange jumpsuit drained her of the charm I once adored. She sat down across from me, and we picked up the phones on either side of the plexiglass partition. "Hi, Megan," I said as I picked up the phone in the visitation room. She sat across from me, separated by the thick plexiglass. Her response was subdued, almost devoid of emotion. She mentioned signing the divorce papers, reminding me that I now had everything. But I hadn't come for that. "I want answers," I said bluntly. "How long has it been going on with Paul?" She sighed, her expression resigned. 2 or 3 months, she admitted. I pressed further. "Why, Megan? Wasn't I enough for you as a husband, as a lover? Did I do something wrong?" Her eyes wavered as she hesitated, offering a weak explanation about being charmed by Paul, about her fear of aging and losing her looks, and how she worried I might stop finding her attractive. It was a feeble attempt to justify the unjustifiable. "That's ridiculous, Megan," I said sharply. "You know that's not the real reason. Was it the money?" She lowered her gaze, murmuring something about Paul convincing her they could escape and start fresh, maybe even travel the world, using the money as their ticket to freedom. "So that's why you decided to kill me?" I asked, my tone colder than I expected. She flinched, but admitted that Paul had told her they could take everything, the lottery winnings, the life insurance, without going through the hassle of a divorce. "And Paul's the one who introduced you to Turner, right?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. She nodded reluctantly. Then I asked if she knew Turner was Paul's uncle. Her nod confirmed it. I struggled to contain my anger. "Why would you with him? And in our bed?" The thought still made my stomach churn. Her answer was blunt, almost clinical. Turner had offered her a discount if she slept with him in our bed. It was part of his twisted deal. That was the moment I had walked in on them. "And you just left me there," I said quietly, the betrayal cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. Her eyes welled up with tears as she stammered an apology, her voice cracking. After a long silence, I decided to tell her. "Turner is dead." Her face turned pale, and she stared at me, confused. "What do you mean dead?" she asked hesitantly. "He came back to finish what you paid him to do," I replied. "I killed him when he broke into the house." She seemed stunned, asking how it happened. I told her about the shotgun my dad had given me years ago. Her teary eyes met mine, and she whispered another apology, asking if I could ever forgive her. I couldn't help but laugh. Short, bitter, and loud enough for the guard to glance in my direction. "No, Megan," I said firmly. "I'll never forgive you for what you've done. You have the rest of your life to think about it, and I hope it was worth it." Without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone and walked away, leaving her staring after me with tears streaming down her face. The next couple of months passed quickly. I packed up the belongings I wanted to keep from the house and hired a contractor to make some renovations before putting it on the market. And once it sold, I moved into a modern apartment closer to my office. During this time, I testified at both Megan's and Paul's trials. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and the jury didn't take long to find them guilty on all charges. I attended Megan's sentencing out of a sense of closure. The judge thanked me for my testimony and sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Paul received the same punishment. While justice had been served, the experience left me with scars I wasn't yet ready to face. Physically, I recovered, but emotionally, I felt broken. Megan's betrayal and attempted murder had taken more from me than I realized. Dr. Julia Clark, the therapist Detective Thompson had recommended, diagnosed me with PTSD. For 2 years, my life was on autopilot. Work, home, the gym, counseling. This was my routine. I avoided relationships, unsure if I could ever trust anyone again. Dr. Clark, however, was persistent. She encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone, reminding me that not everyone would hurt me. Eventually, I decided to take her advice. I hesitated at first, considering a few women at my office who had shown interest, but I wasn't sure about dating a coworker. Finally, I decided to take the plunge and asked Grace, a friendly colleague from another division, to dinner. To my surprise, she said yes. Our first date went better than I expected, and as we continued seeing each other, I began to relax. Grace had a way of making me feel at ease, and we didn't rush anything. By the third date, we became intimate, and it was like a switch flipped. For the first time in years, I felt alive again. Grace and I have been dating for 6 months now, and things are going well. She's introduced me to her family, and we all get along. I don't know if I'll ever get married again, maybe someday, but for now, I'm taking life one day at a time. After everything I've been through, I've learned to appreciate the little things. Who knows what the future holds? For now, I'm content to find out.